thank you everybody for coming tonight. And I'd like to talk to you tonight about our Bring Back the Bluebirds project. It's a project of the British Columbia Conservation Foundation, although that's not how it began. I'll get into that a little bit later. So I know that Michelle has done a land acknowledgement, but I would like to do one from here as well. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the unceded territories of the Cowichan tribes, and in particular, I'd like to express gratitude for the stewardship provided by the Cowichan tribes and other Coast Salish peoples that have nurtured Garry Oak ecosystems in this area for thousands of years. This picture was done by somebody from the Cowichan peoples some years ago, and he donated it generously to our project. Thank you. What I'd like to talk to you today is about Western bluebirds in particular.
We don't see your picture.
Oh, you don't?
No, it's about to.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I will back up here. Let's see. I think it was as simple as I forgot to share screen. So there we go. Let's begin that again. Can everybody see?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Okay. There we go. So I'll get back to there's the art that was donated to the project by somebody from our local community. Yes, so I'll get back to where I was. So Western bluebirds I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of natural history about Western bluebirds so you can get a context for the project. And then I will talk about how the project began and where we are now and what we've learned. So I'll start by saying that Western bluebirds are a member of the thrush family, so they're related to robins and other thrushes. Their preferred habitat is oak savanna habitat. Now that's on the coast. In the interior, like in Okanagan, for example, they like the ponderosa pine habitat. And they like the big oaks with the grassland meadow. And they like it nice and open like this. One of the things that they require is trees that have cavities in them. So they don't actually create cavities on their own. They rely on cavities that have been built by woodpeckers such as flickers and hairy woodpeckers. And you can see this is one actually from San Juan Island who found a natural cavity. But natural cavities have become a little bit few and far between these days. So, but once they do find one, in that cavity, they create a nice grass woven nest, and they lay about 3 to 7 pretty blue eggs. They are ground feeding insectivores. Now you may notice that these birds aren't on the ground. So I think it's probably a little bit more accurate to say they're ground hunting insectivores, because mostly they eat actually sitting in the tree. But I will show you, this is a bluebird hunting. And what they do is they find a perch that's about 4 to 6 feet off the ground. They love fence posts for this. And they'll scan the ground looking for grasshoppers, wasps, grubs, and then they'll dive down and catch it and jump back up and eat it from the safety of their perch again. So bluebirds are migratory birds, and they in this time of the year they'll be down throughout the range, finding food wherever they can. At this time of the year, while they eat about 70% of their diet is overall is insects. About 30% is berries, and this is kind of the time of year when they rely more on berries. Mistletoe is apparently one of their favorites. They like junipers, and but they eat a variety of different berries. just to make up for the lack of insects that you'll find in the winter. And they get down right into Mexico. Their Latin name is Cialis mexicana, so they're actually the Mexican bluebird. But you can see that the bulk of them are along the west coast of North America. And now the question isn't so much why they come north. I mean, why they go south. It's really why they come north. They come north because once they get to the breeding stage in April or May, they each need to find their own territory. And this is because once they're in one of those cavities, they're stuck to one area and they need to ensure that they can provide for their family from that area. So they become territorial at that time of year. And they don't just fight out random spots. They actually return to the area where they fledged. This will become a little bit more important later on. That's why I'm pointing it out. So we'll start to see bluebirds coming back somewhere around, April, and then yeah, and so I'm just going to go on to where we are right now. This year we had 8 pairs in the valley, and 2 lone males, and they produced a total of 61 young. It was so that's kind of a where we are now, but I thought I'd head back into the past a little bit and kind of tell you how we got here. So in the 1990s, Western bluebirds were extirpated from Vancouver Island, from the entire western edge of their range on mainland BC, as well as from the Gulf Islands. The last nesting pair seen on Vancouver Island was seen by Sid Watts, a local naturalist, in 1993. And a local group of naturalists witnessed their decline and decided that they could do something about it. So it was a combination of the Garry Oak Ecosystem Recovery Team and the Cowichan Valley Naturalists that took this on and decided to recover this species. So here are some of the challenges that they faced. The main one was the loss of habitat. So I said before that Western bluebirds rely on oak savanna habitat. We have lost, in this area, that's Garry Oak ecosystems, we've lost over 95% of the Garry Oak habitat that we once had. So if you look at this picture, this is in Duncan, it's around Cowichan Lake. All of this would have been Garry Oak meadows. And it is still where the best habitat remains. But you can see that it's been kind of chopped up and it's been made into farmland and into individual properties. And one thing that happens when people develop it for individual properties is they get rid of those old craggy trees. Those are the first to go. And those are the trees that would have had the cavity nests. So they lost a lot of their cavity nesting habitat when that happened. So another challenge is house sparrows were introduced. Now, I'd like to point out the difference between an introduced species and an invasive species. We've introduced a lot of creatures over the years. It's been a bad habit of ours, but and some of them have been fairly benign. California quail, for example, seem to do very little harm. But the house sparrow is not one of those. And the reason being is they compete violently for the nesting habitat that cavity nesters use. So they will actually go into a cavity and attack and kill the young and any adults that they find in there. Another challenge that that has happened is the introduction of cats. You can see how this would be a problem here, but you know, we have released a lot of avian predators into the ecosystems, and it does have an impact. And another challenge that we've got, this photo kind of blew me away. I took it from the site. There's a site called Flap Canada that talks about window strikes. This is these birds that have been collected, that's 1 year in Toronto of birds that were window strikes. And I've seen in the past, just in the past couple of years, 3 different bluebirds that I knew were killed by window strikes. So that's one that's coming up. So they took on the challenge of tackling these and coming up with solutions to these barriers. One of which was they installed about over 200 nest boxes in habitat to replace the cavity nests that were lost when trees were taken down. Bluebirds fortunately take really well to nest boxes. And we didn't just stop at putting up boxes. We made sure that these boxes were safe. And we did this in a number of ways. One is, you can see these PVC pipes. These are just to prevent mammals like raccoons and cats from climbing up and snacking on the boxes. This is called a raptor guard, and it makes it a little bit harder for raptors will sit and watch, and if they see a pair going in and out of a box, they can use that opportunity to snatch the adults. But this makes it a bit more challenging. And then if you look here, hang on, is this? If you see here, this these sparkly streamers, we call this a sparrow spooker. Sparrows like to hop on top of a box and then enter from the top. That's their kind of, but the streamers are intimidating to them. So what we do is we actually wait until we know that there's a bluebird nest in a box, so that the sparrows don't have a chance to get comfortable with the streamers and get used to them. So we put them up once we know that there's a nest in there, and then we take it down at the end of the season, so that there isn't any, just to make sure that it stays new and scary. This sometimes does mean we have to get the bluebirds used to it as well, actually. I was told, oh yeah, bluebirds don't mind them at all. But they do mind them a little bit. They learn to accept them, and and because they have young in their box, they will keep going back and get used to it fairly quickly. But sometimes we have to try a few times. The other important thing about putting up boxes, and I will say that to anybody who's putting up bird boxes anywhere, is that you actually need to monitor them to make sure that they remain a safe space. So we have a wonderful group of volunteers that look after the boxes every year, checking to see who's nesting in them and tracking whether the birds are successful in their nesting, or whether they encounter predation, or whether the house sparrows are getting into there. They will remove house sparrow nests before they get anywhere, so that we are not contributing to the house sparrow problem. And they collect data so that we can share this with others, and people can use that information to track the different species that are using them. other thing that we do, and this doesn't address any of the problems that I talked about before, but we do feed mealworms. And the reason for this is that it increases their chance of having a second clutch. Bluebirds will have 1 or 2 clutches a season, occasionally 3 for some areas, but not generally here. And if they have ample food, then it does increase their chance of having 2 clutches successfully, which is great. We have a wonderful volunteer, Ted, who takes care of all of our mealworms and keeps them in good shape. Right, sorry, I'm gonna back up a little bit. So all of these solutions are great and wonderful, but they mean nothing for the reason that I talked about earlier, that young return to where they've fledged. So once we had no birds here, there were not going to be any birds here. So this comes to the next part of our project, which is translocations. There is a nice healthy population of western bluebirds in Washington, and particularly in a place called Joint Base Lewis McChord. And we have a group called EcoCities Institute in Washington that will actually go out and collect a family of bluebirds for us and bring them to the border. We have all the permits, I promise. and then I come over with my car, I collect them from them, and I bring them into the Cowichan Valley. We choose families that have young that are about 10 days old. This is it is the most successful strategy. The young are old enough to travel at that point, old enough to band. We give them little color bands you can see here so that we can identify them later. And but they are not big enough that they're going to fledge early if we bring them over. So we bring them just at the right time so that they can settle in before they are released. And what we do is we build them an aviary. It's about an 8-foot by 8-foot box with shaded area and a sunny area, and we put everything that they need in there, like perches and water, and there's a little flap. I don't think you can see it in here, but you might see it in the next photo that we use for putting the food into. We can open it up and behind a blind so the birds don't see us, and just put the mealworms in and out when we come to check on them. And so the bluebirds stay in there until the young are ready to fledge. They're placed in this box when they get there. We give them their own little nest and we put them in the box. We leave it open at the top so it's easier for the parents to find them. And then we wait and watch from a distance. And once the young are flying and able to keep themselves up on branches, then it's time, and we just open up the hatch and they're released into the area. And we've placed boxes around so that the parents can come out and immediately re-nest if they want to. And often they do. So this has been very successful in getting bluebirds to return to the area. So this is kind of I'm going to show you, I've got 2 graphs this evening, so I won't load you with graphs, but I thought it might be a little bit helpful to kind of see. We started translocations in 2012. And if you look, the orange line here, this is how many adults have established a territory. So we don't count anybody that's passing through. This is just adults that have claimed a territory in the area. And you can see that, and this blue line right here is the number of adults that we translocated. And then this gray line is the number of adults that return on their own. So you can see that as we brought over bluebirds, the amount that The population rose very nicely. Now, once we stopped translocations in 2017, sorry, 2018, the number dropped fairly precipitously. So we restarted translocations, and you can see the numbers coming back up. So this is both encouraging and discouraging when you look at it. It is discouraging to see the numbers drop that way, but you can see that it's coming back up, and I have some reasons for optimism, which I will share with you. The first one is that this is not the first bluebird recovery project. In Ontario, the eastern bluebird had been declared rare by Cowichan in 1978. They started a large-scale nest box program, multiple programs. People started putting up bluebird boxes everywhere. And by 1996, the population was recovered enough that they're no longer even listed as a species of concern. So we can see that nest box programs work. This is also not even the first Western bluebird translocation recovery program. The first program of this was actually on San Juan Island. And I wanted to show you the map so you can kind of see how close we are to San Juan. So this is really, I'm calling it the Cowichan Bring Back the Bluebirds project at the moment, but I'm really hoping that this is going to be overall an entire Georgia Strait Western bluebird recovery program ultimately. And what I really quite hope is that once we get numbers up in multiple small populations, that those populations will begin to start supporting each other. And we've seen a little bit of that. On San Juan Island, they initially brought up the population. They did the same thing. They stopped translocations, the numbers dropped. They brought it back up, and that time it stayed. It's been 5 years of health of a population of Western bluebirds on San Juan Island. And what we have seen is occasional birds being shared between the populations. Right now, there's one that was born in Cowichan that has spent 2 years nesting on San Juan. So this is an encouraging sign that this can happen if we keep this up. So the other thing that we have seen is that the Western bluebirds are very successful nesting in Cowichan. With the supplemental feeding, their reproductive success is actually higher than the average reproductive success of their source population. So they are doing well while they're here. We just need to get that return rate up. So what have we learned? So we have learned that the adults have about a return rate of about 1 in 3, and the juveniles have a return rate of about 1 in 5 or 6. The males are about twice as likely to return as the females, and the juveniles, this is a far less pronounced. Now, I don't know the reason for that. I can only speculate. One thought I have is that maybe the toll of reproduction, laying up to 14 eggs in a season, might make the females it might make them more likely to not survive the winter. But the other question I have is whether a male might be more likely to be attached to his territory if he loses the female, whereas a female that loses her mate maybe less attached to the territory? I don't know. That's speculation, but these are the questions I have. But beyond the western bluebirds, we do get actually a number of other species in our boxes. We get tree swallows, we get chestnut-backed chickadees, we get bewick's wrens, violet green swallows, and house wrens. Now, the one thing that this is a delightful side benefit, because swallows in particular have really been on the decline. They've suffered about a 30% decline over the past decade or so. And so it's really nice to be able to support them in whatever way we can. And tree swallows are, to be fair, the most common users of our boxes. That's we've actually I've done a little bit of a graph with the numbers of other species that we get. And the blue is all species. The orange is native tree swallows, and the gray is the attempts by house sparrows. So I was curious to see whether there was any correlation in, or how we were doing on the house sparrow front, and how it may or may not be impacting the other users of the boxes. So what I did see, and it's a little unclear, but because it's only been 4 years that I've been doing this, but it does appear that as the house sparrow numbers have gone down, the numbers of tree swallows have gone up, and the numbers of other birds using the boxes has gone up. This is just yeah, it's still early days. I wouldn't guarantee that that's a real thing, but I think that it's interesting thing to keep looking at. So if you would like to help us with this project, I would encourage you all to visit our website. It's cowichanbluebird.ca. I could put that in the chat if you like. And and you can adopt a nest if you like. What we do is people who adopt a nest, they get an adoption certificate, they get a bracelet, and we bead it with the colors of the bands that are used to identify the bluebirds of your family. And then you get updates throughout the breeding season on how they're doing and what's going on with them. So that's just a fun way if you have someone you think would enjoy having their own bluebird nest that they can get updates on, then that's something you can do to help support the project. And I would like to thank all of you for coming and listening to me tonight. And I'd like to just send out a thank you to all of the supporters, the partners, donors, landowners, and volunteers that we just wouldn't be able to do this work without. So I'm happy to answer any questions any of you have.
Yeah, and you can just unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question verbally, or if you type it into the chat, then I can read it out for you. Up to you.
I have a question for Jackie.
Yes.
Jackie, I've done some work at Big Bar Lake in the interior, and I noticed that there's a certain amount of competition between tree swallows and mountain bluebirds. And usually if I'm near a water source, like a lake, the tree swallows outcompete the mountain bluebirds and somehow get established, and then the mountain bluebird has to go somewhere else. Have you noticed any competition of that kind in Cowichan?
So we do get some competition between the tree swallows and the bluebirds. But it actually works out well with the western bluebirds. The western bluebirds tend to win.
Okay.
Is what I've seen here. And I think they're just maybe a little bit bigger than the mountain bluebirds. I think that might be the issue, the thing there. And it's actually quite nice to have the tree swallows nearby, because once they've established their nests, if they have boxes nearby each other, they do actually help each other guard the boxes.
Good, thanks, and almost hot tea.
One more question, Jackie. Have you found the 1.5-inch hole diameter? Is that adequate for the Western bluebird?
Yes.
It is, yeah. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the talk.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Denis, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, it's actually Teresa. I had a question. So, the adult, the 1 in 3 adult birds that were returning, so these would have been translocated adults that were actually born at the site in Washington State, but are, instead of returning to their natal, to the site where they fledged, they're returning to the translocation site. Is that right?
It's both. It actually, it encompasses both the adults that returned from, I mean, so that have returned and nested here after, I'm sorry, let me start again. It includes the ones that returned after they were translocated the year before. That happens. And then the other adults that will return are ones that returned as a juvenile and then return again the following year. But once they've passed 1 year, their return rate is about 1 in 3, and it doesn't matter whether they were fledged here or whether they were translocated here.
Oh, so the fledglings are ones that are kind of returning the next year as the line that said fledgling returns. Those would be ones that return the next year as a non-breeding juvenile.
They do breed their first year. So once they return, they are adults, but we're just counting them as what previous year's juveniles, I guess is, yeah.
And for, do you know like how many of the translocated adults come back to your nest location, like the ones that were translocated as adults? Do they come back, and do they tend to be sort of younger ones that maybe are not quite as fixated on the place that they've been nesting before? Or?
Yes, I think that once they have established a territory somewhere, they try to return to that territory. So if they've been translocated, some of them, some translocations fail, we bring over a pair and they leave. But often when we bring over a pair, they will claim that territory, and those ones will return, will try to return again. And if they survive, they return.
What's the lifespan of a bluebird?
They can live up to 8 years, but it's actually more frequently, you know, we think that the 1 in 3 is that return is probably their survival rate. So it's
the very, very lucky ones that make it that long.
Yeah, exactly.
When you were showing the nest boxes,
Yeah.
you showed sometimes raptor guards and sometimes sparrow frighteners. How do you choose what to use on an individual nest box?
So we started out, I think, putting a lot of boxes on trees, and we've been upping their protection as we go. So we've moved a lot of them off of trees onto the posts, and once they're on the post, it's easy to put a raptor guard on them. We put the raptor guard on them then. The sparrow spooker, we very specifically wait until there's a bluebird nest in that box. Then we put it up, and then we wait until the bluebirds are all gone and take it off again.
Okay. So you would never have streamers attached to a raptor guard?
No, we haven't done that.
Are there any other questions? I have 1 or 2 more, but guess I'll ask mine if somebody else isn't leaping in, although others can feel free. I'm wondering how you track the numbers. Do you band every single bluebird?
Yes, we do. Yeah, the parents are banded when we collect them for translocation, as are the young that they have that come with them. But we also banned any young that are hatched. We banned them at about 13 days old before they fledge, and then when they fly off, then we can spot them again.
Right. Another thing I found interesting was the fact that they like to hunt from fence posts. And I was wondering if this is the rare instance where human infrastructure actually increases the success of a species.
I think that there's a lot of potential. Like bluebirds are pretty human tolerant. Aside from the problems of house sparrows and cats that they bring, they do well on farms. They like mowed grass. They they like the same sort of, we also like oak savanna habitat, right? It's but they do seem to tolerate humans well, other than some of the problems that we bring.
Videos. Oh, so
Your,
we're not
Denise,
allowed
your-
to share a video, share a picture.
Denis, would you like to speak again? Or
Oh,
Teresa?
it's me again. For the mealworms, do you have like kind of a I saw you had kind of one kind of feeding box, which I assume is where you're putting where the mealworms are put in. Do you have kind of like one for each nest, or do you kind of have one for a meadow that has several nests? And how big are their territories? I mean, when you see the boxes, they seem to tolerate kind of fairly close together, but then of course there's not a bluebird in every box.
Yeah, so they don't tolerate other bluebirds as close as our boxes are. We actually put multiple boxes so that the swallows have all of the territory they want, and they can and they coexist well with the swallows. But they will drive any bluebird that's within about 300 meters of them away.
So you need like one feed box for kind of each active nest then probably?
Yeah, so every active nest gets its own feeder. Yeah.
So
And
for
how often how often do you have to refill the mealworms? Do they live a few days, or just do they get gone in like
So we actually feed them, we feed them once a day and twice if the weather's really awful. When they're actually feeding young, when they're just, when it's a pair, they get fed once a day. Like, so when the pair comes and they start laying eggs, that's when we begin feeding, and we feed them once a day until they have, and we up the amount once they're feeding young. And if it gets miserable, we actually, we feed them twice. That's our, and we only feed them a certain amount because we don't actually want that to be their entire diet. It's low in calcium for what they need. So if they were to rely entirely on mealworms, they would become a little bit deficient in calcium. So we have a set amount that we give them.
so it would be like just a certain percent of their day, what you estimate is the daily calories that they need for a clutch of eggs or whatever.
Yeah, it's about 1/8 of a cup for a pair and 1/4 cup for a whole family.
So you feed,
Commitment.
oh, sorry.
That's a big commitment, feeding them sometimes twice a day. And how long a period from would you be like feeding twice a day? Is it like a couple of weeks? What's the period between when they lay the eggs and when they fledge?
So it takes them about a week to lay all their eggs, and then it takes them about 2 weeks till hatching, and then it's about 21 days to fledge. So it is a good long commitment.
And so you're feeding both the translocated birds and the ones that return on their own. How do you feed the ones that return on their own that are in the nest boxes rather than the enclosures? How do you get the mealworms to them?
So we put out feeders and they find them pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, they have quite the eye for finding mealworms. So we just make sure it's close enough to their feeder that they don't have to travel too far, but not close enough that it's attracting attention to their nest.
Is it just a standard, like a seed feeder, but you put in mealworms, or?
You know what, I can probably share my screen. It's let's see. Oh wait, hang on. And let's see. So if you can see, this is one of our feeders. And we've got this side open on this one because we had two sides on it, and a pair of chipping sparrows got quite territorial about the feeder. And so even though the bluebirds could have fought them off, but they were uncomfortable being trapped in the feeder with somebody antagonizing them. So we actually took that off, and everybody got along better after that. But we have other feeders that have mesh sides, because starlings will sometimes discover them and they'll just take the whole lot right away. And occasionally robins will find them and take the whole lot again. So we have some exclusion feeders that we bring out for those occasions. Sometimes we have to do a little bit of trial and error for a particular area.
Is the San Juan population also receiving supplemental feeding?
I believe they still are. Yes, you know what? I haven't asked them for a little bit, but yeah. I know that they had just a little bit of a dip in the population last couple of years, so I think they probably are feeding again to make sure it stays steady.
Are you hoping to expand this to other parts of Vancouver Island or some of the Gulf Islands?
I would really like to expand this to Salt Spring. They still have some good habitat. They have a bunch of boxes there. I think that they just might need some translocations to get them going. And there are areas around Victoria that still have good habitat that I would like to expand into.
What would be needed to make that happen?
I need to get I need to get contact with the landowners that have the quality habitat and start putting up boxes there, and then hopefully moving on to translocating into the area.
And I guess finding people who are willing to feed mealworms every day or twice a day.
You know, there are so many great naturalists, especially in Victoria, and yeah, there's I think that part will be not so hard, but yeah, I think that the big thing will be making sure that we can, you know, it's a big ask for landowners, but the landowners that we have been really supportive, and you know, of us coming, because you end up with people coming daily on your property, but they get to know us, and they're yeah, it's been good.
And then they get bluebirds.
And then they get bluebirds.
So budget isn't a limit for that expansion. It's just the effort and the people.
Well, it's always work to get the money to do the work, but we have been able to do so far, and hopefully we can carry on.
What kind of budget does it take for a year?
A year's budget is about $100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, how many bird pairs do they translocate each year?
Sorry, is that a question that
Oh,
somebody?
how many pairs are you translocating each year, and has that number changed over the years?
So what we aim for is to bring over 5 families. Now, it's quite a juggling act to bring over a family. And sometimes things like avian flu, or you know, we had one year where, yeah, we meant to start in 2020, but you know, the pandemic closed the borders for that year, and then and really it's just, you know, when they get out in the field, they find what they find, and if they can bring us a family, then they do, and if they can't, then we have to do with less. So we got 4 families last year, And I think we got, what did we get the year before? I think we had 4 again. I can actually bring that up, can't I? There we go. Sorry, I'm just going to try and move this. Okay, so yes, we had 2 pairs established, but I think that we'd actually brought over 4. Oh no, we brought over 2 pairs, and that's when the avian flu closed the border after that. And then the next year we were able to bring over a full 5 pairs. That's and then this past year it was 4 pairs. Yeah.
How hard was the paperwork? How many levels?
Yes, I spend my from about January to April, I spend getting the permits that we need for it. It is the Canada Food Inspection Agencies is one of them. We need for permits from Canada Wildlife. We need permits from the BC branch. So it's and then we need permits on the US side as well.
Wow.
And how many pairs would you be able to translate? How many trips to the border do you have to make every year? Like, are there enough that are at the same right age that they can bring kind of 3 or 4 families at one time, or is it a separate trip to the border each? That must be a lot of time on your part.
We can do two families at a time is really what we can do. And sometimes we aim for 2, and for whatever reason, we are only able to get 1. They arrive and they can't capture the pair or whatever, things happen when you're in the field. So it's either 1 or 2 at a time. And that's just how we have to roll.
How many fledglings or almost fledglings are typically in the family?
So they aim for a middle-sized family, between 3 and 5, but it is sometimes as much as 6. And the reason they aim for the middle is just because it's a small box and it gets a little crowded when they all start flying around. So
Nice. Well, perhaps, is there anyone else who has a question that or something they're curious about? Well, if we have no more questions, I don't see anything in chat, and again, people would have to unmute themselves, so just give them 1 more second before we just pass along our thanks. That was a really interesting talk, and of course, lots of beautiful pictures of bluebirds to look at. Not a bird that living in Vancouver I see all that often, so it's wonderful to hear about the restoration work you're doing to help reestablish the species on Vancouver Island.
I have one final question, which was, if we're going to the Cowichan Valley, where would be the best place to go to be able to see bluebirds?
this is a tricky one for me. I can't give out any property names because, I wouldn't want, to
No.
property owners. But I can say that the north side of Cowichan Lake is kind of the general area where we get a lot of them, and around Somenos Lake a little bit too.
Excellent. And when their season is May to October that they're around approximately, or?
Yes, May to August is when you're most likely to see them. Yeah, in May it'll be pairs that'll be on the boxes, and then in August you might see families all over the place. They start exploring the area a little bit more once the young are about 2 weeks fledged.
Lovely. Well, perhaps I know what I'm doing next August.